unidentified mystery material that's been collected in multiple sites around the world.
What if I told you the US recovered alien craft, and some weren't accidents? They were gifts? What if the government knew and buried it for decades? And what if the man who helped cover it up finally spoke out? This isn't sci-fi. It's not a movie. It's what physicist Hal Puthoff revealed on Joe Rogan.
How many of these crashed crafts do you estimate there are?
Than 10.
More than 10.
More than 10.
And almost no one paid attention. Until now, Dr. Hal Puthoff tried to warn us, not with fear, but with facts. The question isn't if they're real, it's why we're still ignoring them. Let's talk about it. He wasn't some random guy on YouTube, not a conspiracy theorist in a basement, not even a disgruntled ex-employee chasing clicks. Dr. Hal Puthoff was a physicist, a government insider, a man with security clearances most people can't pronounce. He spent decades operating at the intersection of national security and the unexplained. And when he finally decided to speak, he went to the biggest podcast in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience. What he said wasn't loud, wasn't emotional, wasn't even dramatic, but it was chilling. The United States has recovered over 10 non-human crafts since the 1940s, and not all crashed. He said it like he was ordering lunch, but it hit like a bombshell. Some of the craft, he claimed, weren't accidents. They were left here, gifts, by something intelligent, for us. Now imagine hearing that. Would you believe it? Probably not. But what if the man saying it had worked for the CIA, helped run their psychic spy program, had been asked to evaluate the public fallout if the truth ever came out? Most people still didn't believe him. The headlines the next day? Celebrity gossip, a new iPhone, TikTok drama, not a whisper about Hal. And then, a few days later, something strange happened. Over 29 Palms, California, a glowing hexagon appeared in the night sky. It shimmered, pulsed, shifted into a perfect circle, and vanished. Coincidence? Maybe. But to those who heard Hal, it felt like confirmation. This wasn't his first warning. In the 1970s, he helped pioneer remote viewing, psychic surveillance funded by the US government. He wasn't just in the room, he helped build it. And he kept asking, what if these visitors aren't from far away, but from right here, hidden in a version of Earth we never learned about? Inside Pentagon briefings, Hal and other advisors were asked to assess the fallout of disclosure. Their verdict? 60 catastrophic consequences. Economic collapse, mass hysteria, spiritual upheaval. Lawsuits from corporations denied access to reverse-engineered tech. Their recommendation? Don't tell the public, ever. Because the real threat wasn't what these crafts could do. It was what they meant. A total rewrite of everything. Science, history, reality itself. So the silence held. For decades. Until Hal had enough. He knew the risks, but he also knew the longer we wait, the worse it gets. So he told the truth. And almost no one listened. But what if he was right? What if we've been looking up, waiting, when it was already here? It sounds insane at first. More than 10 UFOs, not just spotted, but recovered. But what shook people most wasn't that they crashed. It's that some of them didn't. They were donated. Yes, donated. Like dropping off a used car for a neighbor. Except this car could bend time, break physics, and wasn't built by us. When Dr. Hal Puthoff said this on the Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan's reaction was what anyone might ask. Wait, what do you mean they were given to us? Hal didn't flinch. He explained it like a physicist would explain gravity. Calm, clinical. Some crafts, he said, arrived in pristine condition, under such controlled circumstances that a crash was impossible. No impact zone, no debris, no damage. They just appeared. If that's true, we're not just being watched. We're being tested. Think about it. If a civilization can cross galaxies or dimensions, surely they can drop off tech without breaking it. So why hand it to us? Hal offered a theory. Technology seeding. The idea that advanced civilizations might gift tech to accelerate others, to see how we handle it. Like leaving a smartphone in ancient Rome and watching. What happened after recovery is where things get dark. These crafts weren't buried and forgotten. They were studied, reverse-engineered, and allegedly used. Where? That part is murky. But Hal referenced Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, long tied to UFO material, including Roswell debris, insiders told him. The materials weren't from any known Earth-based source. And some researchers, not random YouTubers but scientists and ex-intelligence officials, believe we've already built functional prototypes using alien tech. Imagine a vehicle that bends gravity instead of burning fuel, a drone that doesn't fly, it slides through space. Now imagine that locked away for decades, while humanity burns oil, fights wars and dreams of Mars. Why wasn't it shared? Hal hinted at the answer: lawsuits. Corporations suing the government for hiding tech that could have made them obsolete. One of 60 classified consequences tied to disclosure. Let that sink in. Some companies believe they were denied the future because a select few got access to alien breakthroughs, and the rest were left behind. And Hal? He wasn't guessing. He'd seen the files, sat in the meetings, helped draft the security briefings that warned. This information could destabilize civilization. Then he went public, calmly, factually, and most people just scrolled past. But what if it was all real? What if this wasn't a theory, but a final warning? Because giving someone a car is one thing. Giving them the power to rip open space? That's something else entirely. It's the story everyone thinks they know.
Unidentified mystery material that's been collected in multiple sites around the world.
Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. A rancher finds strange wreckage in a field. Silvery metal, impossibly light, unlike anything he's ever seen. The military shows up fast. Within hours, they issue a statement. We've recovered a flying disc. And then, just as fast, they walk it back.
1940s have actually come out into the world and lay out details about what really happened at Roswell.
Correction. It was just a weather balloon. That's where most people stop listening.
World was told, nope, just a weather balloon.
They laugh, roll their eyes, and move on. But what if that second version, the weather balloon story, was the real hoax? According to physicist and government insider Hal Puthoff, Roswell wasn't a mix-up or a myth. It was the start of something bigger, a pattern that's been unfolding in secret ever since. Hal didn't speak in speculation. He described the crash and recovery with calm certainty. He claimed the debris was sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a name that keeps surfacing in UFO investigations. And the materials? Not just strange, unexplainable. Memory metal that could crumple and return to its original form. Fragments that bent without breaking. A structure with no seams, no rivets, no propulsion system. It wasn't built. It looked grown. That was the moment they realized. This wasn't ours. So was Roswell the first crash? Or just the first they couldn't cover up in time? Because here's what really mattered. For one brief window, about 24 hours, the government lost control of the narrative. And in that time, the truth leaked out. Then the clampdown began. Eyewitnesses silenced. Debris confiscated. The story rewritten. Just a balloon. And most people bought it. But behind the scenes, panic set in. If Roswell was real, then we weren't alone.
All right, speaking of kind of outer space stuff, here's a question. Are we alone?
And we weren't in charge. So they started studying, experimenting, hunting for more. Roswell wasn't an anomaly. It was a trigger, a green light. And soon after, more reports surfaced. In Arizona, South America, and beyond. Different crashes, same pattern, no origin, no explanation, no accountability. And anyone who spoke out, discredited, threatened, silenced. The playbook never changed. Find the wreckage, lock it down, rewrite the story, move on. But Roswell never really went away. It became a scar on the American psyche the moment we nearly saw the truth, and then pretended not to. Today, it's still treated like a joke. But for people like Hal Puthoff, Roswell wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. And what comes next? That's what terrifies them. It wasn't a scene out of a movie. No glowing aliens. No secret autopsies. Just a conference room, deep inside the US government, filled with people whose job was to plan for the unthinkable. After decades of recovered craft, unexplained sightings, and whistleblowers poking at the seams of the story, the government finally asked a question it had been avoiding. What happens if we tell the truth? Not just to scientists, not just to insiders, but to everyone. What happens if we stand in front of the world and admit, we are not alone? We have the proof, and we've had it for decades. So they formed a team, a secret advisory panel, a group of physicists, defense analysts, theologians, and psychologists. One of them was Dr. Hal Puthoff. Their mission was simple and chilling: explore the implications of disclosure. And so they began their work, not by asking if aliens exist. They already believed that answer was yes, but by asking, what would the fallout be? And what they found was horrifying. They came up with 60 possible consequences of telling the public. Some reactions were predictable. Economic panic as stock markets crashed and industries imploded. Military instability with countries scrambling to secure alien technology. And mass hysteria, people fleeing cities, religions fracturing, and cults forming overnight. But other effects were stranger. There was a spiritual crisis. What happens to faith when a being smarter than God arrives. People faced existential depression, questioning the point of life now that humanity was no longer special. And then there were the corporate lawsuits. Yes, major companies threatened to sue the government for hiding technologies that could have rendered them obsolete. One classified report even floated this terrifying possibility: disclosure could shatter the foundation of human identity. Because what are we if we're not the smartest things in the room anymore? Imagine the Vatican having to explain why their scriptures didn't mention grays from Zeta Reticuli. Imagine physics textbooks being rewritten overnight. Imagine every world government admitting, we're not in charge. Now you understand why, after weighing all 60 effects, the advisory panel came back with a single chilling recommendation: do not disclose. Because the danger wasn't just scientific, it was existential. The public didn't need to panic about space weapons or tractor beams. The real threat was the truth itself, that we are not alone, that someone or something is watching, that they may be smarter, older, and infinitely more powerful, and worst of all, that they might not care. So they buried it. Again, the sightings continued. The whistleblowers kept speaking, but the official line never changed. Nothing to see here, but Hal Puthoff. He didn't agree, because after all those years in the shadows, one thing became clear to him: the lie was causing more damage than the truth ever could. And so, decades later, with nothing to gain and everything to lose, he stepped out of that classified world and into a podcast studio. He told the truth, not all of it, not yet, but enough to crack the silence. The world shrugged, kept scrolling, kept shopping, but some of us were listening. And what we heard, what he tried to warn us, was simple: disclosure isn't coming. It has already come. You just weren't paying attention. We've spent decades looking up, eyes to the stars, waiting for something to arrive. But what if the real story was never about arrival? What if they were already here? When Hal Puthoff began talking about ultraterrestrials, even Joe Rogan leaned in. Because this wasn't your usual UFO folklore. This wasn't aliens from Alpha Centauri. This was something far older, far closer, and far more disturbing. I don't think all these crafts are from deep space, Puthoff said. Some of them may be from Earth, just not our Earth. That phrase, not our Earth, stuck like a splinter. Because what does that even mean? Puthoff suggested these beings might not be extraterrestrial, but ultraterrestrial, a term whispered among intelligence circles, meaning not from another planet, but another layer of this one. The theory? That Earth has always had others, civilizations, beings, entities, hiding, maybe beneath the oceans or in the dense pockets of the Earth humanity never mapped. Some might call it folklore, others a glitch in our perception. But to Puthoff and others on the inside, it was a real possibility. Think about it. We know more about space than we do about our oceans. We've mapped Mars in higher resolution than Earth's deep trenches. And yet, throughout history, ancient cultures from opposite sides of the world told eerily similar stories. Beings who came from beneath the Earth, sky gods who lived in the mountains, portals hidden in caves, and sacred lakes that no one dared to cross. Were these just myths? Or fragmented memories of something we're not allowed to remember? In 2002, a classified Navy study reportedly looked into USO sightings, unidentified submerged objects. Crafts are moving at impossible speeds underwater, making 90-degree turns without breaking apart. No heat signatures, no propellers, just motion. Some of these objects were tracked moving hundreds of miles in minutes, from the ocean floor to the upper atmosphere. No splash, no sound, no explanation. And whenever these sightings happen, military radar systems sometimes go dark, as if something, or someone, is jamming reality itself. Puthoff didn't claim to have all the answers, but he offered a spine-chilling analogy. It happened just days after Hal Puthoff's podcast aired. Just as the internet started chewing over the phrase ultra-terrestrial, just as people began whispering again about Roswell and recovered crafts, something appeared over California. And it didn't come quietly. 29 Palms, California, a remote desert town, quiet, empty, the kind of place where people go to escape the noise. But on the night of April 27th, 2025, around 10:27 p.m., a flash in the sky stopped everything. A lone witness, staying in a cabin near Joshua Tree, stepped outside to stargaze. That's when they saw it. A floating hexagon, glowing, brighter than the moon, its edges pulsing, morphing, almost breathing. It moved slowly, but erratically, like it was disoriented or watching. And then, before their eyes, it shifted shape, from a six-sided prism into a perfect circle. No sound, No smoke, no propulsion, just form. And then it vanished. No explosion, no sonic boom, no evidence, except the footage on a shaky smartphone and a trembling voice describing what they saw. That footage would go on to stir small fires across UFO subreddits, conspiracy channels, and forums. Some dismissed it, others didn't, because they noticed something that the mainstream ignored. This sighting didn't just appear out of nowhere. It appeared right after Hal Puthoff's interview, right after he said, some of these crafts weren't accidents, they were gifts. Right after he floated the idea that something ancient and local might be surfacing. Coincidence? Maybe. But 29 Palms is no ordinary desert. It borders one of the largest military bases in the country. It's a stone's throw from classified airspace. It's where top-secret exercises are tested far from civilian eyes. And yet, no official response. No military acknowledgement. No FAA explanation. No press release. Just a lingering silence. Some tried to connect it to a SpaceX launch that occurred earlier that day. But there was a problem. That launch happened thousands of miles away, in Florida, and 3 hours earlier. Whatever appeared over 29 Palms wasn't a rocket, it wasn't a drone, and it wasn't weather. So what was it? This wasn't the first time a strange aerial event happened near a UFO disclosure moment. In 2023, a blue spiral of light appeared over the UK sky. People thought it was a portal, turned out to be frozen rocket fuel. But the timing was uncanny, just like now, because just days after the 29 Palms sighting, something else happened. Washington, D.C., a congressional hearing. More whistleblowers, more testimonies, more pressure for UFO transparency, almost like the phenomenon was responding. One moment, we get truth. The next, we get light. Hal Puthoff once said, disclosure won't come from the top down. It'll come from the edges, from leaks, from sightings, from people asking too many questions. And now, it was here, a flash in the night, a shape that changed, a message, not in words, but in wonder, and maybe in warning. Because this wasn't about one craft, it was about timing. And timing, as we're about to find out, is everything. Disclosure was supposed to be a moment, a headline, a history book entry. But in reality, it was a whimper, not a bang. No aliens on the White House lawn, no live press conference with little green men, just a quiet, underwhelming string of truths, and a public that barely blinked. Because the fallout of disclosure didn't arrive as panic or chaos. It arrived as disinterest. And that, arguably, was even more dangerous. Let's rewind. Just days after the glowing hexagon over California lit up the sky, Congress held another high-level UFO hearing. This wasn't some fringe gathering. This was official, documented, government-sanctioned. Former intelligence officials and military personnel testified under oath. One of them? Luis Elizondo, former head of the Pentagon's secret UFO program, AATIP. He confirmed, yes, there are craft. Yes, we don't know how they work. Yes, some of them aren't ours. Another whistleblower added, we have non-human biologicals. That's code for bodies. And how did the public react? Some memes, some hashtags, and then silence. Because the world had already moved on. The news cycle was back to celebrity feuds, new phone launches, stock market dips. But if you were paying attention, you'd notice something strange happening beneath the surface. For starters, there is still no official government system for civilians to report UFOs. If you see something unexplainable in the sky tonight, you can't call NASA. You can't call Homeland Security. You're told to report it to a non-profit civilian group, like the National UFO Reporting Center. That's like calling customer support for a wildfire. Despite multiple government-confirmed craft, despite military pilots filming objects that outmaneuver our best jets, there is no national database, no public hotline, no investigative body dedicated to tracking the greatest mystery of our time. Why? Because silence is strategic. Because acknowledgement means accountability. And accountability means explaining decades of denial. And maybe, just maybe, the real reason this all feels so subtle. Because the fallout of disclosure isn't just panic. It's reprogramming. It's the slow, quiet introduction of a new reality, slipped in between commercials, diluted across thousands of clickbait headlines, until the public doesn't even know what's real anymore. We showed you the videos. We held the hearings. We let the whistleblowers speak. They'll say they told us. And technically, they did. But what they never did was connect the dots. They left that to us. The sightings, the shapes, the hearings, the morphing hexagon in California, the whispers from insiders like Hal Puthoff, the ancient ocean floor theories, the physics we don't understand. They're all fragments. puzzle pieces. But when you start putting them together, you begin to realize that the biggest story in human history already broke, and the fallout isn't coming. It's already here. You just didn't recognize it. For most of us, the story ends with aliens. Small gray figures, big black eyes, flying saucers, science fiction stuff, finally proven real. But what if that explanation is too simple? Because as more whistleblowers come forward, and as sightings grow stranger, a new theory has begun to rise. A theory that has nothing to do with science, and everything to do with belief. It starts with a question. What if these aren't aliens, but something spiritual? On Joe Rogan's podcast, Hal Puthoff used a curious phrase. He said these beings might not be spiritual in the religious sense, but supernatural. They operate beyond nature as we understand it. In other words, they break the rules. They ignore gravity, shift shape, appear, and disappear at will. They bend space, warp time, and defy the very laws of physics. That sounds a lot less like aliens, and a lot more like entities, angels, demons, jinn, watchers, different names, different religions, same pattern. In the Bible, it says in the last days, there will be signs in the heavens. In Hindu texts, beings descend in flying crafts called vimanas. In Islamic tradition, the jinn live among us, unseen but present. And in almost every ancient culture, there are stories of shining ones, sky gods, or otherworldly visitors that shaped our civilizations, and maybe even our DNA. So are we dealing with advanced life forms, or something we used to worship? Some whistleblowers, especially those from military or faith-based backgrounds, have started using a dangerous word, deception. They argue that what we're seeing in the skies isn't first contact. It's the setup for something far more sinister, that these beings aren't benevolent space travelers, but ancient deceivers, manipulating perception, preparing humanity to accept a new reality, a reality where they are gods, where they offer miracles in the form of technology, where they rewrite our history and maybe even our future. It sounds extreme. Until you remember how many major religions warned about something like this, even the elect would be deceived. False signs and wonders, wolves in sheep's clothing. Some of the most respected scientists and strategists in the government considered this possibility during classified briefings. Because if the public suddenly believes that a higher intelligence has arrived, and that intelligence can perform miracles, heal disease, bend time, offer limitless energy, what happens to governments, to religions, to laws? They all collapse under the weight of a new authority. And who's to say that's not the plan? Because if something has the power to arrive in our skies, manipulate our minds, and vanish without a trace, it doesn't just have technology, it has control. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. This isn't about aliens. This is about power. Who has it? Who loses it? And who we're about to give it to, without even realizing. So no, we might not be dealing with Martians or travelers from Zeta Reticuli. We might be dealing with something that's been here all along, watching, waiting, and preparing to be seen, not as visitors, but as gods. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He didn't drop some viral mic drop moment that broke the internet. Instead, Hal Puthoff spoke with the calm of a man who had carried a secret for too long, and who had finally decided it was time to let it go. But here's the part no one talks about. He wasn't trying to be famous. He wasn't promoting a book. He wasn't selling a course or a conference or a doomsday bunker. He was just tired. Tired of watching people dismiss the truth because it didn't fit their worldview. Tired of seeing colleagues silenced. Tired of standing in rooms with men in suits debating whether humanity was ready, as if that decision should belong to them. And when he finally spoke, not in a classified briefing, but in a podcast studio, it felt like a man whispering a flare into the night sky. A signal, a warning, a plea. I'm not saying they're good. I'm not saying they're evil, but they're real. And we've kept that from you. That was the moment. The unspoken line beneath every word Hal said, I'm sorry I tried to warn you, but I did try. And now, whether we like it or not, the responsibility is shifting. No longer in the hands of governments, or secret panels, or physicists under NDA, but to us, to the public, to the curious, to the ones who listened when no one else would. Because whistleblowers don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like quiet old men who've spent too long in dark rooms, but they don't speak out for attention. They speak out because they're afraid. Afraid of what's coming, afraid of what's already here, and afraid that when it all unfolds, no one will be ready. In Hal's voice, there was no panic, but there was urgency. He didn't demand we believe him. He just asked that we consider the impossible. that we pause before laughing it off, that we don't wait until the sky opens or a shape shifts above our heads to start asking the hard questions. Because when the noise clears, the media, the spin, the ridicule, what you're left with is a voice, quiet, measured, but unmistakably telling the truth. And if we don't listen, well, we can't say we weren't warned. It's a strange phrase. I'm sorry I tried to warn you. A sentence that shouldn't exist, and yet somehow says everything. Built into those 8 words is frustration, rejection, the pain of knowing the truth and watching the world look away. When Hal Puthoff spoke, he didn't just reveal secrets. He revealed a pattern of warnings ignored, of signs dismissed, of truths buried beneath decades of noise, distraction, and denial. Now that you've heard the story, maybe you're wondering, was he right? Was it real? Or just another myth wrapped in credibility? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, why do we dismiss those who risk everything to tell us what we don't want to hear? Because here's what we know. Craft sightings are real. Government hearings have taken place. Whistleblowers have testified under oath. And there is technology in existence that no known nation on Earth can explain. So what do we do with that? Do we reject it because it doesn't fit our view of the world? Or do we finally look up and reconsider the stories we've been told? There are only 2 options. Either it's the biggest hoax in modern history, or it's the slow drip of the most important secret ever kept. And if it's the latter, one day something will happen. A flash in the sky, a shape that shouldn't exist, a voice saying, "We've been here the whole time." Then people will look back. They'll find the clips, the footage, the testimonies, and someone, maybe you, will remember Hal Puthoff. And they'll say, "He tried to warn us." By then, it won't be a warning. It'll be reality. And the only question left will be, what now? So now the question isn't if, but why? Why the silence? Why the secrecy? And most of all, why now? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share what you believe.